Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of Culturally Appropriate with Jerod Hollyfield. I am obviously your host, and we are looking forward to having a wonderful debut show today. Um, we've got our special guest, our editor, Davis Hunt. We're going to be going down the mayoral ads over the last election cycle, just in time for early voting to end and the election to come up next week. We're going to talk about the Barbie movie, and then we're going to give you our weekly film rundown as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So, obviously, most of you probably saw or at least heard of the Barbenheimer phenomenon last weekend when the box office had record numbers. AMC stock soared on the news that the movies had broken so many records, and lots of people said going to the movies was back. It should have been a time of celebration for our culture coming back from COVID and our culture coming back from all of the disruption that has happened over the past few years. But that's not how a lot of people saw it. For some reason, the Barbie movie, because of the fact that it was by a female director and was about a popular doll, people had their sights already set on the movie before it came out, which was very unfortunate. So I wrote an article, an actual review of the Barbie movie last week, and it was published on Tuesday, talking about what the movie's done and sort of the rock and the hard place that this movie found itself in. Barbie was never going to be a pure movie. On one side, you had a toy that was being turned into a potential film franchise, as we've seen with Transformers and G.I. Joe and many other toys, doesn't always make for classic cinema. So there are accusations of the studio selling out, of Hollywood not having any creativity. But then you also had the baked in feminist, what it means to be a girl context of Barbie as well coming into this debate. So this was never a movie that was going to shock people because it was going to come out of nowhere and be creative. It is a piece of art. It's also a piece of marketing. And it was a piece of marketing that had to reconcile Barbie's image. We've been probably through about 30 years, and the movie makes a really great point of this, of various Barbie dolls that are trying to cater to certain interest groups. Barbies in every colors of the rainbow, Barbies with different kinds of jobs, and they've occasionally run into criticism. So there was this weird thought process about Barbie that somehow she was pure. Somehow this movie was going to taint it. And we saw some ridiculous reviews from leftist outlets or outlets like NPR. But what really bothered me, and one of the reasons that I reviewed Barbie so early, because if you've read the pamphleteer, I tend to take a little bit of time and think about patterns in films before I write about them. So I might write an essay about 3 or 4 films and sort of talk about trends. I hadn't done a review of a movie probably since last summer, but my editor asked me if I would go ahead and review this so we could jump into the fray. But my main problem with the film, and something that I found very concerning for the conservative movement in general, is the fact that conservatives already had their mind up made up about the movie, and not just conservatives, conservative influencers. So, quick story related. 2 weeks ago, I was visiting my parents, and they were telling me that they heard on Fox News that the Barbie movie was the Pink Menace. The Barbie movie was going to be really bad. It wasn't for kids. It was woke. My parents occasionally go to the movies. You know, they are not weekly moviegoers, but they go regularly. It's not like they haven't been to a theater since COVID. They've been more than a handful of times. They hadn't really heard anything else about the movie besides what was being said on Fox. 2 weeks before that, during the 4th of July weekend, I noticed that my wife's grandfather had a DC Drano post up, and it was an article by Peachy Keenan, who wrote on her Substack, and it was picked up by Revolver News, that Barbie was the Pink Menace. And this term has been bandied about almost a month before the movie's release. Now, I've been following Peachy Keenan for a very long time. I bought her book, had planned to review it. I've seen her essays in various conservative publications. I noticed, though, that after her book came out, she kind of started pitching to the lowest common denominator. And I was trying to figure out, how did Peachy Keenan see the Barbie movie? You know, these are critiques that are being made about this film that obviously somebody had to have seen the movie. And, rumor is she lives in LA. So, my editor and I thought that maybe, she got to a press screening or got a screener or something like that. But in the lead up to the movie, Peachy Keenan's criticisms got more pointed. Peachy Keenan went on Charlie Kirk. Peachy Keenan gained a lot of followers. She was on Fox News a couple of times. She wrote an article. And the night before the movie premiered, a couple hours before it was released to the general public, she put up a poll and said, essentially, if it's up in the corner of your screens, what is the best Barbie ticket offset to atone for paying money to write my scathing review? Now, this leads up to a lot of questions. If somebody hadn't seen the movie yet, why have they been going on national media outlets for the past month excoriating it? It makes absolutely no sense. So I asked Peachy Keenan through direct message and also on Twitter, how did you see the movie? Just very casually, because I was skeptical at this point, given some of the stuff that she was saying. And she admitted that she hadn't seen the movie at all, and that she had based all of this campaign that got national attention against the Barbie movie on a couple of trailers and casting, which is the equivalent of reading a random page from a book and writing a book review and trying to discern the themes of the book. To be clear, there was no way a Barbie movie was ever going to be able to just not talk about feminism. Barbie has been turned into a feminist statement by Mattel for years, since before I was born. So that was something the movie was going to have to deal with. And the idea was that because this movie mentions feminism, it's woke. And that's a major issue. I brought this up to Peachy Keenan. She used the line, do you need a Kleenex? And then whenever I brought up again, this is highly unethical. Somebody that is representing the conservative movement on a national front that has one of the best-selling books on the market right now should be able to engage in free speech. They should be able to critique a cultural product after doing their homework instead of going off to use this opportunity to sell more books, which is exactly what Peachy Keenan has done. So Peachy Keenan, free speech advocate, who spent a lot of her career attacking big tech for censoring individuals, blocked me straight out of the gate. No conversation. She later deleted the tweet. Luckily, I took screenshots. This is very concerning to me on a number of levels, largely because of the fact that critique is one of the few weapons that anyone that doesn't want to follow the Hollywood party line has left. If one can critique a movie, if one can write an essay about a movie showing why it doesn't work, showing its ideological biases, that's a very powerful tool. But whenever somebody abuses their position of power, as Peachy Keenan has done, and essentially becomes the Jason Blair of the conservative movement or the Stephen Glass of the conservative movement, it reflects badly on everything that she believes and everything she's built her career on. And it reflects badly on anybody who wants to oppose that party line. But Peachy Keenan wasn't the only offender in this situation. Some of you may know Jack Posobiec, probably most famous in broader pop culture for his belief in Pizzagate, but also editor of Human Events, frequent guest on Steve Bannon's The War Room, kind of seen as this post-COVID badass, post-election fraud badass by the right. To give him credit, Jack Posobiec actually saw the movie, but apparently he had his phone out the entire time while he was watching it. And started Saturday morning doing his live tweet of the movie, which I would hate to have been next to him in the theater. So he said, the Barbie movie opens with a symbolic baby killing scene teaching young girls to not be mothers. When someone disagreed with him, and it's a terrible reading of the movie. It's somebody that, again, took something out of context and wanted to get some likes out of it and wanted to throw some red meat to his base. He said to whoever this person is who said he's lying, shut the funk up, you illiterate swine. Excellent debate, right? The left can't meme, but the right has the intellectual upper hand, as Jack Posobiec proves. The scene is explained that before Barbie arrived, young girls only had baby dolls to play with to promote motherhood. Then Barbie arrives and they smash the baby dolls, symbolizing the arrival of feminism to teach girls to not be mothers. Okay. aside from the horrible sentence structure and the lack of commas there, which will forgive him a little bit for Twitter, doesn't really make sense. The movie, if you've seen it, brings up a really important point that before Barbie, dolls in general were only baby dolls. So from birth, all women were allowed to really play at was being mothers. And Barbie as a doll wanted to give a model of what it's like to be a teen girl to little girls who had aged out of Barbie. This scene is a very fun nod to 2001: A Space Odyssey, but like any movie, because movies are works of art, one scene in isolation really doesn't speak for an entire movie, because there's a wonderful monologue at the end of Barbie where America Ferrera's character, who is the human, the owner of Barbie, says that sometimes it's okay to be a mother, and society respects that. So it comes full circle. So Posobiec saw the movie. At least he has something on Peachy Keenan, but at the same time was cherry picking for his own purposes to try to rile up his base. We've got other quotes from Jack Posobiec too. Jack Posobiec, also free speech advocate. Whenever Josh Hawley wrote his book on big tech, Jack Posobiec was talking about sending Jack Dorsey to jail for what he did by banning President Trump. Unfortunately, I can't follow Jack Posobiec either anymore, because I tried to engage him in debate and he immediately blocked me. One of the weirder tweets that Jack Posobiec made, just saw Barbie and the answer is now clear. Men must be restored to power. Okay. So Greta Gerwig, the director of Barbie, obviously is female, but her co-writer and life partner Noah Baumbach is not, and he co-wrote the movie. And I would argue that one of the reasons the movie works so well is because of the fact that it had both a male and a female perspective. As I talk about in my own review, Barbie is one of the few movies that actually does talk about the differences between the sexes. I don't know what people were thinking. A movie that features a doll that lacks genitals, which the movie makes some really good jokes about, was going to be this strong statement about masculinity in general. It seems weird to me and just absolutely bizarre that somebody would think like this. But not only that, the head of Warner Brothers, the studio that released Barbie, is a male. This is not a situation in which females have totally made this movie. Most of the crew was male. Film is a collaborative medium, and obviously Greta Gerwig is kind of at the center of that. But the movie itself makes a joke about men being in charge. This is not about men being restored to power. This is not some feminist call to arms. Jack Posobiec almost seems like a character that Olivia Wilde cut from Don't Worry, Darling. It makes no sense. I mean, this is just almost a reductive caveman sort of line of thinking from Posobiec. Again, not somebody that wants to debate, not somebody that was super happy whenever I asked a couple of questions about his reading. We also had, probably most famous, a lot of people that took the Jack Posobiec line and, in the wake of other influencers coming in, try to do their own thing. So Tom Sauer, who runs some veterans mental health groups online, had made up his mind about the Barbie movie before he even saw it. I mean, this week, this was a way for conservatives to win points and just rile up the base. The problem with that is, wouldn't you want a base that is hopefully supposed to win this culture war that I personally don't believe exists at all? Wouldn't you want that base to be able to go see a movie and judge for themselves and to have an actual conversation about it? Admittedly, Twitter is not the place to get into deep film or cultural criticism. It's a place to get a conversation started. But just looking at this, got roped into seeing the Barbie movie against my better judgment. Why would you not want to see a record-setting movie that's going to be remembered decades from now, if it's part of the culture and you consider yourself a culture critic? Makes absolutely no sense. Probably one of the reasons that the right makes such terrible cultural products. But he got roped into seeing the Barbie movie against my better judgment. We're 20 minutes into it. What fresh hell is this? Again, guy on his phone in the theater. Very classy, holder of traditional values, holder of etiquette, not concerned about his own ego at all. But it continues and it gets a little worse. He's such an expert on culture that the first thing he can do is throw up a meme of Tucker Carlson. It's definitely a very well-read, very well-watched guy here. It's not funny, it's not intriguing, it's not interesting, it's aesthetically horrid. As a sidebar, Barbie didn't use any CGI except occasionally for some sparkles. So if you saw the Barbie movie, all of that was built. Some of the best production design of anybody that knows what they're talking about, anybody that knows anything about film, some of the best production design ever. I mean, caused a shortage of pink Pantone paint because of the fact that it was so dedicated to building this world. But according to Tom Sauer, film and culture expert, it's aesthetically horrid. I guess he just doesn't like pink. I don't know. Just sitting through this whole thing, like, again, he's in the theater. He's got to be looking for these GIFs. The jerk has his phone on. People around him clearly are probably annoyed. And not only that, then he goes and takes a screenshot of the screen in the middle of a movie theater and says, this toxic screeching diatribe here is just awful. My guess is that if he'd actually listened to the monologue and thought about how it related to the earlier scenes, would have been a very different situation for him if he wasn't so concerned about looking cool on Twitter and catering to that base. Probably the most famous of all of these would be Ben Shapiro. We got a couple more from Tom Sauer here. So I don't know why Ben Shapiro looks like he works at the movie theater. It's kind of a fashion faux pas, I guess. But there was some really great, I'm not going to show him here, but really great riffs on this picture of Ben Shapiro, where, you know, they replaced him with a Ken doll's bottom half, and it was hilarious. I would urge you to check them out. But my producers dragged me to see Barbie, and it was one of the most woke movies I've ever seen. My full review of this flaming heap of garbage of a film will be out on my YouTube channel tomorrow at 10 a.m. And this is a famous 43-minute review of Barbie. I'm not quite sure why editor emeritus Ben Shapiro, Ivy League grad of the Daily Wire, is spending 43 minutes reviewing the Barbie movie. Daily Wire has, as you all know, probably they've been trying to get their own version of a film studio set up here in Nashville. And for anybody that has seen the Daily Wire's movies, it is not going well. You know, regardless at a base level, Barbie trounces everything Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire has ever produced. But Ben Shapiro still feels that something gives him the authority to be able to go and critique the movie. And if you watch the 43-minute video, I threw it on when I was doing some yard work, and it at least distracted me from the heat. He does this ridiculous thing where he like sets some Barbies on fire. You know, it's ridiculous theater from a nerd. Essentially, he's just trying to get more clicks. You know, this post went viral for him. It did to anybody, and here's the main problem with all of this, and you see Lauren Chin as well. You know, the Barbie movie literally has Ken try to be the patriarchy, explicitly called the patriarchy, to Barbie Land and amend the Barbie Land Constitution to remove the Barbies from positions of power. Lauren Chin clearly missed the entire part where Ken himself was pretty much marginalized in Barbie Land, and the whole movie is a lot deeper than that. So just this cherry picking, tweeting of scenes, screaming of this movie as woke, people thinking that labeling something as woke is in itself some kind of baseline criticism. You know, they're all trying to get you not to engage with culture, which is a pretty nasty thing for somebody to do. But what's even worse in the case of people like Peachy Keenan and Ben Shapiro, you have Ivy League graduates who have built their careers on speaking to less educated people. Or people that did not quite have the level of privilege. And yes, I use the P word here. And I do not mean it in that regular way. But, you know, these are individuals that went to Ivy League schools. They're the elite, but they built their careers on pretending not to be elite. And they've also built their careers, if they got through the Ivy League, on knowing what cultural criticism is, on knowing how to write a good essay, on knowing how to argue. But they don't think enough of their target audience to bother to do that. They think that you, if you're their target audience, if you're a fan of Peachy Keenan or Ben Shapiro, is so stupid, all they have to do is throw out words like woke, and you will just follow along with them. So, you know, there's really not much difference between them and the same Harvard-educated people at Goldman Sachs. They're not part of the populist movement. They are exploiting you. And the funny thing is that it took a movie about a doll that is basically shot entirely in pink to show some of these fissures in the conservative community. If the conservative community is going to ever win this fictitious culture war, it's going to have to start focusing on making actual culture. And if it can't do that just yet, if the means aren't there, if the financing's not there, it needs to be actually able to engage with a text if it's going to critique it. not just jump into the fray to throw red meat on the face. This almost like 20 million people who have seen Barbie at this point, if they're not politically active, they're just looking at people like Ben Shapiro and Peachy Keenan and thinking they're stupid. All they're doing is further alienating people they could be bringing into the fold if they made rational, legitimate arguments. And that's really all I've got to say about Barbie. So what we're going to do now is bring on my guest, Davis Hunt, who, as you all know, if you follow along with the Pamphleteer, is our wonderful, dedicated editor. And we're going to go over some of the mayoral ads.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at the way you capped that segment off, man. It was great.
So, have you voted yet in the early voting?
No, I'm an election day voter. I also want to say about the Barbie thing. I found it hard to because I spend too much time on Twitter, more than I'd like to admit. I found it hard to even get an accurate assessment after just reading, those kind of assessments that you were talking about all week. Yeah, so it was difficult for me to even get a sense of how to approach the movie. I personally was not, I don't know, I wasn't crazy about it, but yeah, anyway.
And so much of it is just people trying to like sap the fun out of going with your family. I mean, that's just sort of the...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't... The point that you made that's important is that, like, if you just... People exploited it purely to rile up the base, which is just like the boomer strategy that Fox News has used for the past, 20 years to literally zero effect. It's almost dumbed down their audience and not taught them how to engage this stuff seriously. So I think that's something important to consider. So anyway, let's...
But as we're going to show, it's not just conservatives who make terrible culture. So
yeah,
we've got early voting ending tomorrow, I believe, and then the election is next week. And then we are going to have a runoff because there's 3,000 people running. So what we've done is I ranked the ads last week. Probably got lost in all the Barbenheimer hullabaloo that's been going on online. But political ads, I wouldn't say are really ever a great genre. I mean, there are some brilliant political ads, but for the most part, not really the best genre if you're looking to exercise your artistic skills. But I mean, I've seen the ads from the last couple of cycles. Davis, I know that you have lived in Nashville all your life. So how do these ads stack up to what you remember seeing in past elections?
I don't know. I mean, political ads are so forgettable. I do remember David Fox's ads from 2015 pretty vividly. I thought those were very effective. But I mean, beyond that, I couldn't tell you. There was, what was her name? Rebrovic had an interesting ad about picking up trash in 2015. Those are about the only ones that stand out, though.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's kind of like the same firms just slapping the old ad onto the new candidate and going from there. But
I mean, my like question for what a candidate displays with their ad is worth discussing, because I don't think that anyone's getting persuaded by the policy proposals and focus of their ads. It's more, it engages people on a different level. They're not analyzing these ads and thinking, I don't know, maybe they are. What do you think?
I don't know that they are, but to me, I mean, it's the affectation. And I feel like for the most part, especially, our front runner right now, Freddie O'Connell, but also Heidi Campbell, you've got just a complete lack of charisma, which, like it or not, I feel like, David Fox was a charismatic guy. I feel like that really did add to that campaign. Carl Dean was a charismatic guy, but you sort of like see these actors performing, and it's kind of like, it takes me back to my days directing music videos where you've got these like artists who like think they're so cool, and your job as a director is to like try to strip that out of them because it's so phony. And these ads just don't do that, I think, in any way.
I mean, they're running for mayor, they're not running for Senate or the president, so I think the like charisma quotient is probably lower.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I mean, do you think people respond better to like a cutesy ad? Like, we'll get into it here in a second, but like a cutesy ad like O'Connell's, or just kind of a more boilerplate ad like Wiltshire or Raleigh?
I mean, I think the boilerplate will work, but if there's some way to actually tie that to a mayor's actual personality, and that is the weird disparity. You're right. Like, I feel like these ads are way too glossy to be for this campaign, and that's kind of our catch-22 is you've got like production quality Senate House ads for this local race, and in most of the cases, the candidates just aren't ready for prime time.
Yeah.
So
well, let's pull them up.
Yeah, let's go with what I thought was maybe one of the worst political ads I've ever seen in my life. And this is Heidi Campbell's "Nashville is Out of Tune," which, as we all know, she stole that slogan from mayoral candidate Stephanie Johnson, a Black woman.
In my 20s, our band toured the world. It was my job to keep us in the pocket. Right now, Nashville is out of tune. We need a mayor who will get things sounding right. I'll take on crime, make our city affordable, and pick up the damn trash. I'm Senator Heidi Campbell, and I know how to get Music City back in tune.
So yeah, Davis, I want to hear your thoughts on this ad because I published mine last week. So I think we can't start talking about it without talking about the forum where she was like wearing the headscarf while trying to like get the
oh yeah,
she
visited the I can't remember what it was. It might have been the I can't remember where it was, but yeah, she was wearing a what do you call the headscarves?
hijab.
Yes, no one else was. She was the only candidate that wore it. I mean, the funniest part is that she just stole that tagline from Stephanie Johnson, who, like, I heard her, at the transit forum, Stephanie was talking kind of like poetically about the problems of Nashville. And it was clear that this line about Nashville being out of tune was kind of like her artistic expression of her political platform. And she would weave it into all of her answers. And, that's the thing that sticks out to me the most is her just taking that wholesale.
Yeah,
but, I mean, at the same time, you can't believe her. I don't know what band she used to tour with, but I guess she had this in her hip pocket to pull it out. Like, think about it. Was she delaying this reveal that she used to be a cool rock and roll star until this ad? Or why didn't she like lead with that? That might, you might bring in a new group of voters if you openly campaign on understanding the music industry.
I don't know, man. I want to see her transcripts. And I mean, I think that's what sort of soured me on the ad is like, there's this weird mix. I mean, we also, if you're familiar with Gretchen Whitmer's campaign in Michigan, I talk about it in the article, she won by saying, fix the damn roads. And, Heidi Campbell throws that in there too. And there is this like certain trend in liberal politics, especially with female candidates where, and Megan Barry, I think, was like the best example of it. And we all know by this point she was a phony. But every time that she talked in her ads, she was just like kind of putting on this affectation. I think Gretchen Whitmer does the same thing. I mean, you see it with certain candidates, right? Like, I mean, Marianne Williamson certainly does not. Tulsi Gabbard never did. But it's sort of this like white, middle-aged woman affectation that these candidates put on that like they're trying to be cool. And the fact is, like, the fact that she would like collude with Phil Williams during the whole like Andy Ogles transcript gotcha and be the expert on Andy Ogles not being authentic.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and then release this ad.
She's also been running on the line Nashville needs a mom, and doesn't it kind of like, I don't know, this might subvert that message a little bit. Her being a touring rock and roller, not exactly mom like behavior. Isn't mom supposed to be at home looking after the kids?
Well, as Barbie taught us, women can do everything, and according to Jack Pasevic, that is a problem. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go to. I mean, it was neck and neck with these two ads for me. Like, I think this Freddie O'Connell ad is abysmal too. But let's go ahead and take a look at it for those of you who have not had the displeasure of watching.
Billionaires and bachelorettes, or us. I'm Freddie O'Connell, the only candidate for mayor to vote against the stadium deal. Tourists and outsiders are getting all the wins. Let's build a Nashville for Nashvillians again. With expanded childcare, housing we can afford, and transit that works. For our community I never take my eye off the ball.
Introducing Nashville's next mayor, Freddie O'Connell.
Billionaires and bachelorettes.
I'm just wondering who us is. I wrote about this briefly this morning. Like who, he clearly has a very specific idea of who us is. He's drawn lines more assertively than any other candidate around who the city should favor and who it should not favor. And I don't think it's as simple as just saying people that live in the city. What kind of person is Freddie O'Connell appealing to? What kind of person does he want to work with? He had this interesting interview with Ed Clay that was released yesterday, I think, where he talks about, like, he's responding to some of his responses to Steve Smith's attack ads that have been put out against him, saying that, the city has the ability to choose who to work with and who not to work with. And it's important. And he even indicates that the city has can set expectations for what kind of person that they want to live here. So like the just main question for Freddie is, who does he want to live here? Who is an acceptable citizen? Is it those that are, is he against those who do not see transit as viable in the city of Nashville? He's run so aggressively on transit. And I think that if you showed that to quite a few people that have lived in the city, either, more than 5 years, I'd say, most people, when they see the transit thing, they're like, what? Nashville's the second most car reliant city behind Memphis in the country. And, a lot of people think that that's, I've lived in walkable cities and it's great. That's just not the type of city that Nashville is, nor is it set up to accommodate this like robust transit system on any scale that would not cater to people that live within a very tiny area. And so, it's kind of like he's appealing to these urban Germantown, East Nashville, like the gentrifiers, basically, or I don't know how you would describe them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is weird too. The campaign success has been perplexing to me, just because David Briley basically killed his political career with that failed transit plan. And that was something that Nashvillians overwhelmingly voted against. So this seems to be just sort of a pet issue, like you're saying, for like the weird fetishist who love to ride the bus.
Yeah.
I also the thing is, and I know it bothers you too, because we've talked about it, but sort of like the weird fascination he has with these 20-something-year-old bachelorettes and why he's always mentioning them. Like, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to make not that kind of doctor here, but it's a little creepy to me.
I could understand it if he were a single man living in Nashville. Maybe you're fascinated with the bachelorettes because they're they're always downtown and they're purportedly, some of them are single, but he's not single. It's a bad joke, but you see what I'm saying. It could be exciting for a young man to live in the town of Nashville and have a fresh group of girls coming into town every single weekend. It's not the worst thing in the world.
No, I feel like if like things had just gone a little differently in his life, he would be Joaquin Phoenix and Joker, just like you get that vibe from the guy, I feel like. The thing that also really strikes me about this ad is just how much Freddie O'Connell has gotten away with that, a candidate like Matt Wiltshire has not been able to get away with. This idea that like all of the black people in this ad are absolute props and they're looking up to the white male coach, and that's not something anybody's marked upon.
Or hold on. Hey, let's not pull up that ad just yet.
Yeah. So that, and then the way that he just sort of talks about these female bachelorettes. This is kind of like, you would expect somebody to be saying this kind of thing on the right about these like, young women who want to come to Nashville and give us their money to enjoy themselves. I was just at the Ed Sheeran show on Saturday and we saw lots of bachelorettes. We saw lots of people from out of town that, he would be making fun of in this ad with the weird Joe Biden impersonator billionaire, which also was kind of a cognitive dissonant thing about the ad. But it's annoying, like if you want quiet, but like if you're going to Broadway on a Saturday, why would you want quiet? Why wouldn't you, go to a bookstore in 12 South or something.
I think you made a good point about it in your article where you said he's kind of built his campaign about knowing about the ins and outs of national government, but has set up this very crude either or dichotomy.
Right.
It's like us or them. When anyone that has worked in metro government must understand that there is a positive side effect of the tourism industry, which is it brings in a massive amount of tax dollars, and it's the economic engine of the city. So that that he's like showing this kind of like chauvinistic opposition to it is just patently dishonest. Like what's he going to do? Go down and shut down all the neon after midnight or something?
Well, I mean,
like,
he basically said he was going to do that with Steve Smith. I mean, he had that horrible ad or that horrible tweet this week about Steve Smith and how Steve Smith makes the beer more expensive and blah, blah, blah. And then on top of that, asked everybody to donate to Act Blue, which he's not even supposed to be doing as a technically nonpartisan candidate.
To be fair, the beer at Steve Smith's bars is expensive. I was there last weekend and I went to Tootsie's, and then I've had friends comment on this at Tootsie's specifically that the beer is like $10 for a Coors Light or something. And if you go to Roberts, which is where I normally go, it's like $6. I can't remember. When you're downtown buying beer, you're just like, you don't even worry about the price. At least that's my approach.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that, but it seemed to me like he was implying that if you go to Hendersonville or you go to Knoxville or you go to Chattanooga, the beer is cheaper, and Steve Smith has made beer in the city unaffordable for the average Nashvilleian on his football team. I also don't know, like, this is the weird football thing too. Like, I don't want to show the ad because I'm sick of looking at this dude's face, but when he, like, if you've seen the other ad in the article where he's like walking around his nice, beautiful green space because he's a privileged white liberal, and he catches the football just like off the cuff, like he's freaking Ellen Ripley in Alien Resurrection or something, and just sinks it.
I was going to say Randy Moss. That shows, our different cultural influences there, but.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like that Freddie just seems very fake to me, in every possible way. And,
his campaign has been very effective because he's drilled in on the one like anxiety of Nashville voters, which is that the city has started to like take the concerns of tourist interests more seriously than those of residents. And he is the one candidate, he is drilled into that anxiety aggressively, and it's been very effective. No other candidate has done that, which I'm not sure why, because it's, for anyone that's been observing the city for the past couple of years, it's pretty obvious that that's the primary concern, is that this focus on tourism. The Titan Stadium deal rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I've got an opinion on that I won't trot out here. But so he's wisely run his campaign, but I don't think, and he also is very, I mean, he's the most like politician-y candidate of them all. He speaks in this very glossed over bureaucratic language. He's not going to answer a question straight. He's going to obscure your question, which may be more common sense, with just layers of bureaucracy and talking about partners. He just burrows down into the minutia of how the city works without directly addressing people's concerns. And, I think that, one of the city is obviously increasingly becoming more and more cosmopolitan by the year, but one of the, defining characteristics of those that grew up in or are culturally Southern is their kind of distaste for more abstract ideas. They tend to distrust them in the aggregate. Of course, there are exceptions. But on, as a base, I think that the South and people of cultural Southern origin tend to distrust these like abstract ideas when it comes to government. They want common sense things. I mean, like Alice Raleigh's run an effective campaign in that regard. She's just saying we need to fix the schools. The police force is bad. We need to staff it up, get better police officers. In the country, in the city, spending too much. I mean, those are common sense things that you don't need to be buried in bureaucratic newspeak to talk about. Anyway, done with my rant.
No, I absolutely I get it. What I'd like to do is look at 4 more ads. I think the other ones, you can read the article. But I want to look at this Matt Wiltshire ad because I think it's hilarious, and I want to look at the Sharon Hurt ad because I think it's ridiculous. And then I'd like to look at Alice's ad, and then what I saw, which doesn't.
Well,
really
let's do, because I don't want this to go too long. Why don't we just do like one or two more?
Yeah, let's
do Matt's and then Alice's, because Sharon's not really. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think the important thing to get across from this Sharon Hurt ad is that she talks about these white men and their privilege, but she nakedly omits O'Connell out of that, even though, he is another Ivy Leaguer that's a native son. And a lot of that is like, there've been rumors on Twitter and a lot of people that know her saying that she's really gunning for a position in this administration. So she's not going to piss off Freddie O'Connell. But let's take a look at Matt's ad and then Alice's ad.
Right.
I'd say the Gingrich ad was my favorite of the season, but at least for this cycle, it's kind of not relevant at this point. So Matt Wilshire's ad we put at number 8.
As Nashville parents think about the first day of school, like never before, we will have hope and worry. I'm Matt Wiltshire. As mayor, I will invest in school safety. That means well-trained school resource officers, working with police to get illegal guns off the streets, and connecting at-risk young people with critical mental health resources. We can only have the best schools in America if Metro has the safest schools in America.
Matt Wiltshire for mayor.
Yeah, so this is a pretty boilerplate ad, but I'd like to know your thoughts on it.
Well, I mean, I've read all of your assessments of this. So like, the first, I was looking for the black hand in the background, and it's interesting that it's an open fist, not a closed one. I wonder how, I mean, we've both been on film sets and have set up cameras and thought about the framing of the shot. They clearly, that was included in the shot for a reason. They like it in the background. And I don't know how much thought was put into it, but it is interesting. I think it's just funny, if nothing else.
And I feel like when I saw it's what he's saying is not bad. And I feel like Wiltshire's had some pretty good ideas in all of his ads and on the campaign trail about increasing mental health resources, talking about school safety in a way that, other candidates wouldn't talk about it. But this ad just makes no sense to me in the sense that why is he in the school, right? I mean, how did he get into this art building? Did he just like set up there? And then the ending when, they're like sprinting with this huge cooler like down the greenway.
That cooler looks like something you put a six pack in.
Yeah, or a heart. I mean, it's like why would you give your child that cooler? Like, I don't know who production designed this video, but it's like such a horrible job. I mean, on the surface, it looks pretty slick, but I mean, it makes no sense as a concept, which is just hilarious to me.
Yeah, pretty funny.
Yeah, so let's look at Alice Rowley's ad, and to be clear, the pamphleteer did endorse her, much to Bruce Berry's chagrin, who dredged up a conspiracy theory about it. But this is the ad that I put at number 2. I liked Gingrich's ad just a little better because it was a little bit more humorous, and I thought the humor worked even though his policy proposals didn't in the ad. But this was one of the ones that I was like, I really do think this is like a really solid ad. It knows its candidate. So let's take a look at it.
With this election, we can reject the recipe book that has failed cities, higher taxes, higher crime, failing schools. To do that takes electing a new kind of leader. Alice Rowley. Nashville native, business leader, wife of a combat veteran. She's not here to defend the downtown crowd, and she won't raise your taxes. Alice is ready to go to work for us. Alice Rowley for mayor of Nashville.
Yeah. So thoughts on this one, Davis?
Well, I'm thinking about the crime stuff, which is interesting. A common criticism of just no one. What's weird about this election is that criticism from be it a journalist or a sitting council member, whoever, they tend to just say such and such candidate instead of referring to them by name. They'll say like a candidate, is exaggerating the issue of crime in the city or something. One article that came out this morning in the Tennessean was about crime, and showed property crime and violent crime over the past 50 years. And it shows, spikes in the 80s. We've settled down with both, with property crime decreasing as violent crime kind of slightly ticks up. One of the things she's been criticized for is emphasizing crime, and like Bruce Berry's always like, that's the tell. A Republican that's the tell in a nonpartisan race, is that the Republican is concerned with crime. And it's a longer discussion, but one of the things about that criticism of her is that like the reason that property crime rates are down is because people don't report property crime anymore, because the clearance rate for these crimes is it's around 30%. And that's a national issue, but the police department's understaffed by 200 officers. There's a number of issues and a number of reasons why you wouldn't bother reporting when your car gets broken in. My car got broken in a couple of months back. I mean, it would just take more time for me to have to deal with the police. I had to sit there, wait on them. It'd take an hour, probably 2 hours. I just, it's not worth it. So people are unwilling to admit that this is what you saw happen with San Francisco. It's like this constant denial of the existence of crime running amok. So I think it's interesting that she, it's good that she led off with that. It does, in a sense, identify her with people who can see with their eyes and don't see with data. They can assess the world directly through their sense perceptions instead of reading about it in an article. And I think that's what that indicated. But
yeah, and I feel like out of the other ads that did try to use data, the kind of weird thing was it was all data from the same circle. So, you had a Bruce Berry article from the Tennessee Lookout being used as evidence that somebody was good on zoning, for instance. Yeah. Or you had Bill Freeman, who ran for mayor as a Democrat 2 election cycles ago, getting an endorsement from the Nashville scene, which he's owns. So it's this sort of like little circle of people who tap their friends to run, and that's who the press and the supposedly like logical evidence-based ads, parts of the data for the ads are coming out of. And Alice is actually like using rip from the headline stuff. I mean, like that's her main deal here. I also think it's telling to me that in terms of like directing the ad, in terms of camera placement, she's the only candidate that isn't the main focus of every single shot. Like when she's in a shot, she's with somebody, that person, she's talking on the person's porch, that person gets equal time. Half the time her face is turned to the person she's talking to, or she's in a, shot that's not a close up of her, that's like with her family or with constituents, which I think is a really good look, because just listening to Alice when she was on the podcast, she's very down to business. Like, I don't think that she's got time to show off her catching football skills. I don't think that that's something that concerns her.
Yeah.
She wants to get elected. She wants to fix these problems. She doesn't want to deal with all of this frou-frou garbage that kind of comes with the ad cycle.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree with you. Those are kind of underscore all the reasons that we chose to endorse her, was for that exact reason. I mean, yeah, to your point about the talking points being circulated within this small circle, it's also, one thing that, like in Wiltshire's ad that he doesn't mention, is that what's the 80% of third grade, 80% of elementary school graduates aren't reading at grade level. There's a whole litany of stats that you could put forth to talk about education issues that are kind of outside the window of what is permissible to say if you're talking to the Tennessean or the Scene or the Post, etc. And they stay cleanly within those boundaries.
Yeah, so I mean, it's essentially, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories here, but there's this version of Nashville that sort of taps each other the run, and then there's the rest of the city, and then they're the people that live in the suburbs that pretty much make up the economic engine. And
I know, yeah. That's good. The political, politics is always to a certain extent insular, but I do think that one trend that we're seeing nationally and locally is it's becoming more insular, and the relationship between the media and the political parties, which for a long time was kind of decoupled, is going back to what it was at the turn of the 20th century, which is just papers being the organs of political parties. And who's to say that that's a bad thing? Maybe that's more straightforward and honest. At least clearly, like, we're not going to be. I'm not going to read the banner thinking that it's nonpartisan. And like, you know, I'm not going to expect them to watch their bias because it's like that's why Trump was effective as a candidate, because he totally parsed apart that the purported unbiased nature. You know, when things start flying outside the window of acceptability by their judgment, bias is no longer, you know, it's a crisis that must be. Anyway, I'm totally going off on a tangent, but anyway.
Well, do you think we're going to see any new ads for the runoff, or do you think they're just going to keep recycling these?
I think they'll just recycle. I think you'll see some attack ads come up, but I mean, I could only speculate on that front. I don't think any candidate's going to release a new ad, though. Maybe Freddie will. He seems to put out more than anyone else. He's got a more fluid. I mean, like, look, I don't agree with Freddie on. I'm not. His political platform does not appeal to me. I'll say it that way. But he has run a very effective campaign, and anyone that's interested in winning in a local election would do well to study it and understand why it's been so effective. Because when he was on the council, he was one of the, I guess he wasn't an extremely vocal leader. He was fairly reserved. And, you know, it's kind of interesting to observe how his posture and image has changed, even in my mind, over the almost 2 years now that he's been running for mayor. He's transformed himself into someone that appears to be a guy that could be mayor. Like when he first announced, I was like, there's no way, that's a joke. That was my serious thought. I don't think anyone believed, and he has persistently campaigned, running a very effective campaign. He's reaching he knows exactly who he needs to reach, and he's reached them very effectively. And you know, it's worthy of examination.
For sure. So that's our ad run up. I guess we're going to see how things go next week. So Davis, thanks so much for taking the time out. And when is your show? It's on Wednesdays at 7. Is that right? Office hours?
Yeah. It'll be Wednesday at 7. I might start doing it at noon. These noon shows are fun.
Yeah. You know, like a good way to kind of like get the energy going for the day and get through the rest of it. So awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and I will see you at some point next week, I'm sure. So
all right, see ya.
Cool. So the last thing that we're going to be talking about today is the weekly film rundown. Now, today's been a very film-centric show. This is a culture show. It just kind of happens that the biggest stories in culture this week were film, but we always like to give a complete and exhaustive weekly film rundown, because we want you to go out to see movies in the theaters. We think that's a very important thing to do, especially in a city that has so many different screening opportunities. There's at least 10 to 12 movies opening just about every week in Nashville. So if you read our full weekly film rundown, I go through everything. I go through what I feel like are like the top 2 or 3 things that I would want to see during the week. And then in addition to that, we also go through all of the Bollywood, Tollywood, Collywood, sometimes movies from Malaysia and Egypt that Regal Hollywood 27 and AMC Thoroughbred show. But I wanted to talk about a couple of movies this week, because for those of you that have seen Barbie, those of you that have seen Oppenheimer, maybe you realized how great going to the movies was again, and you hadn't been in a while. And there are plenty of other options right now that deserve your attention. And the cool thing this week is that a lot of these movies are kind of under the radar, but nonetheless, I feel like that they're definitely worth checking out. I know I'm going to be checking out my pick of the week tonight. So the movie that I say is the must-see for this week is the new A24 horror film, Talk to Me. It comes out of Australia, and I'm going to let us watch the trailer, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. So this movie is kind of an update of The Exorcist by way of social media. It's a bunch of Gen Z hipsters who I think are art students, and they find this embalmed hand, and I don't really know how that happens. There it is, right there. And this hand actually goes through and possesses people. It makes going viral thing in both senses of the word. So the brothers that directed the movie are from Australia. If you know anything about Australian horror, it's usually very tongue-in-cheek, and it's also usually incredibly scary. It doesn't really rely on a lot of CGI or jump scares. It just kind of gives you this haunting feeling. Reviews for this movie have been great. It has, I think, a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, which sometimes that usually means that a movie might just be kind of boring and just trying to appeal to everybody. But in the case of a horror movie reaching that level, that's pretty good. Not to mention, A24 has a very solid track record for releasing some of the best horror movies of the last 5 years or so. So if you liked Scarlett Johansson's Under the Skin, if you liked Hereditary, Midsommar, The Witch, It Comes at Night, this is the kind of horror movie for you. So that's my pick. I'm going to be hitting up a showing probably tonight or tomorrow. Another pick that I want to go over with you all, and this is something that's shrouded in mystery. For the Travis Scott fans out there, you all know that he's releasing a new album. And his new album, I don't really know what it's called, but he's got a movie coming out this week that is shrouded in mystery called Circus Maximus. And I normally, this is a Fathom event. It's not playing, on full screens. It's playing a couple of times. If we want to go ahead and just play through the trailer, I can talk my way through it. But what's interesting about this movie is it looks like it takes a page out of the Beyonce Lemonade playbook, if you all remember that from 2016. Surprise album drop, surprise long-form music video. Travis Scott has collaborated with some of the best directors in international cinema. So the director of Drive, Nicholas Winding Refn, the Argentinian French director Gaspar Noé, who's made movies like Irreversible and Vortex, Love, the 3D pseudo-porno movie that was on Netflix a few years ago, and Nashville's own Harmony Korine, who made Spring Breakers. So all of these directors worked with Travis Scott on this movie. I want to go into it not knowing what happens and just kind of let the images wash over me. So I'm going to try to make the time to see that one this week. I've got two other picks. This is a pretty rich week for us. The third one is called The Mother and the Whore. And this is a film that came out in 1973, but has been very hard to find. I was looking for it just to kind of see if I could find a DVD or a VHS, and the VHSs are going for $120 on eBay. This is a movie that was made right after the collapse of the French New Wave. And if you know anything about French history, there were some protests in 1968 that students rose up, and it basically kind of fragmented French cinema. And it went from this movement that was revitalizing cinema and that influenced American movies like Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate. After that, a lot of the friends in the movement broke up, like Jean-Luc Godard, Francois Truffaut, and French cinema, while they were still making movies, it was a little more fragmented. So The Mother and the Whore comes along, and it's a 3.5-hour movie that's semi-autobiographical. Jean Eustace is the filmmaker, and it deals with the moral and political fallout of a menage a trois relationship that the director apparently found himself in. I haven't seen this movie yet. I'm not going to pull a Peachy Keenan and give you a review, but I'm incredibly intrigued. It is playing Tuesday and Wednesday at the Belcourt. I think Tuesday night at 7 something and Wednesday around 3 o'clock. And I'm going for the experience. This is something that, you don't get in other cities. This is kind of a Nashville only thing, and we have the Belcourt to thank for that. The other movie that I would say is a high recommend for me this week that I'm looking forward to playing at AMC Thoroughbred 20 and the Belcourt is Theater Camp. And this is a movie that it's got Amy Sedaris. So if you're a fan of Strangers with Candy or any of her other work, she's in it. The lead from The Machine, which was kind of a great underrated movie from Memorial Day weekend. Basically what happens here is Amy Sedaris falls into a coma, and her tech bro son ends up taking over this theater camp and trying to run it into the ground, and all of these sort of theater geeks unite. The movie's played the festival circuit this year. You see Sundance at 1, South by Southwest. That's not always the best seal of approval, but this movie's got some edge to it by all accounts, and the trailer itself just looks hilarious. So I'm definitely going to try to make time to see this one as well. In terms of big releases, we're not really going to go over The Haunted Mansion. You may have heard of it. Disney, anybody who's been to the movies recently knows, has been kind of running on fumes They had Guardians of the Galaxy, which was a pretty big hit. Little Mermaid did okay, did not get the best reviews, did not do well overseas. But a lot of their movies that they've been releasing, they're just struggling to keep up. Marvel's kind of on the downward spiral. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was easily the weakest entry box office wise and quality wise of that entire series. So what we have, and I think this is sort of like Disney coming out of the Ron DeSantis, so the pre-Ron DeSantis years. The failure of Lightyear, the failure of Elemental, the failure of Strange World. So you might remember the 2003 version of The Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy that was based on the ride in Disney World, Disneyland. There's a remake of that movie for some inexplicable reason. That movie didn't do well. It wasn't well received. This movie's not looking to do well in the wake of Barbie and Oppenheimer, and it's also not been well received. The director of the movie is Justin Simeon, who made the Sundance film Dear White People. I've not really seen anything. He did make a movie called Bad Hair on Hulu a few years ago, but not a director that you would kind of give the reins over to a franchise to. Some of the actors seem really appealing. Jamie Lee Curtis is in this. It's her first role, but outside of The Bear, since she won the Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Lakeith Stanfield from Sorry to Bother You is in it. Danny DeVito, who's always a pleasure to watch on screen. But the whole thing just looks like a mess to me. I mean, I love myself an Owen Wilson movie, but I just don't know how this is going to work out. It just seems like it's over budget, not going to be funny. I'm sure I'll check it out at some point, but it's definitely not at the top of my list. We also have some other releases that are smaller opening. The first Slam Dunk is an anime film that is the story of a lowly point guard on a high school team. So it's bridging sports and anime. We've got a weird looking movie called The Baker with Ron Perlman, who's trying to find his missing son, and he's carrying around his 8-year-old granddaughter in a baguette with a bunch of heroin in it. Ron Perlman is kind of grating to me these days. Guy from Beauty and the Beast who suddenly became this political expert and just is rude as heck on social media, but the movie is interesting enough that I'll probably give it a look. And we also have a film called The Essential Church, which has a really intriguing premise. It follows 3 pastors who refuse to shut down in the wake of COVID. The problem is the movie just kind of looks like a retread imitation of the typical left-wing movie you would get that's about a social issue. So even if its politics are in the right place, it does not look like it's going to be a particularly intriguing watch. So I've listed out all of the different Hollywood options on the Weekly Film Rundown that I'll be posting on my Twitter, and that's in the Pamphleteer newsletter today. But we've got a movie called Bro. We've got a movie called Tag and a movie called Rocky or Rani Kil Prem Kahani. All of them are musicals of some sort, and kind of these nice 3-hour epics. If you haven't had a chance to check out a Bollywood movie, I would urge you to do that, or one of the other variations of the Telugu film industry. We have a lot of offerings. About 4 or 5 Bollywood movies open up, or movies in this vein in the Indian film industry or Malaysia or Egypt every week. So I would highly recommend checking one of those out if you have the time. And that's what's playing in theaters this week. So that wraps up our first show. I hope you had a good time. Next week, we'll be back talking about various trends in culture that come up, probably mention the outcome of the mayor's race. So have a great weekend, and whatever you do, give it some thought. Bye.